So, this is story number 7, part 2. We're talking about the criminal case of the Warnocks. Now, if you haven't watched part 1, please go back and watch it. It kind of lays everything out for you. So just a reminder, the content of this video may not be appropriate for some. Viewer discretion advised. So, okay, so we were talking about the Warnocks. They were charged with child abuse, actually 23. So 12 federal and 11 misdemeanors. So what I'm going to talk about is actually the children that were involved. Now, please keep in mind, all of this is public knowledge. The kids' names, the ages, their parents, everything is public knowledge. And I will flash up articles, so if you want to read them or whatever. So there's a lot of children involved, but there was a lot of children and families that didn't come forward. I personally know of 2 families that did not come forward. So out of respect of their families and themselves, I'm going to change their names because it wasn't publicized. But I think their story needs to be heard. So let's start with the first one, Trey. I knew him from high school. He was one of the younger of his siblings and him, and he was locked in the box for several hours a day. His 2 older siblings were to help out with the younger children and like watch guard. Trey does remember being in the boxes, but when this all went down, with the Warnocks and Mrs. Anderson walking in and finding it, news travels fast in this town. Believe it or not. Their parent got a notification about it, so, or a phone call or something, and they actually ended up racing over there and to pick up their kids. When their parent got there, they told the 2 older siblings to get in the car and stay there. The 2 older siblings actually remember that, and they said their parent was pissed. They were gonna kill someone, I swear. But they remember seeing their parent carry Trey out and yelling at Betty Warnock, just letting her know what she did was wrong. But later in life, Trey does remember going back to the place of the house and trying to cope with all of this. Unfortunately, it messed a lot of kids up, and it's heartbreaking that this happened. The Warnock's house actually burnt down. I can't find any information. That's information from living here that I know it burnt down. And the land sat empty for a long time, and now there's a new house built on it. So Trey would go and sit in the woods and try to cope with all this. Just horrible. The second family was maybe there a week. Junior recalls watching his younger sibling being in the box. The younger sibling don't remember it, but the older one does. He was told to stand guard and watch the kids. Both Junior and their younger sibling says the memory is faint. Thank goodness for them. But they do remember the boxes, and they do remember the younger one being put in there. Okay, so I'm going to start listing off those that were made public. Again, all this information is public knowledge. It was all in the media, so let's start with Dorothy Hayes. She had 3 kids there. They ended up moving out of state shortly after all of this happened. Her daughter Monica was tied to a chair for punishment. The other 2 children were very traumatized. Their names were actually not released. There's not much information on these and what happened, but I'm sure there's stuff there. She did testify about her daughter. So, okay, second one is Cindy Angerhofer. I think that's how you pronounce it. I'm sorry if I hacked it up. Her daughter, Haley, was 8 years old, and her son, Matt, was 3 years old. Haley complained of watching other kids get abused and Matt not being fed. Sherry McFall, Aaron was her son, and he was 18 months old. A couple different occasions she picked up Aaron, and he had bruises. The final time was he had bruises all over his body, and when she confronted Betty said Aaron had fallen downstairs. Sherry stated that it was 4 or 5 carpeted stairs, and the bruising was not consistent with the fall downstairs. She ended up not taking Aaron back after that. Dina Byers was 12 years old at the time. This is a child. She testified that Betty pulled her pants down and whipped her with a swatter one morning because Dina got sick. She testified she took care of the younger children. She would get them up and change them before their parents got there. The children were also to do chores, but if they weren't done correctly, they were punished. Dina also testified her parents took juice over there for them, and the Warnocks actually sold it to the other kids for 25 cents a cup. Just floors me. Okay, so Frank Byers, 15 years old, he's the brother of Dina, testified he saw Rusty Warnocks. Now, remember, this is one of their adopted kids at 8 years old, being made to eat his food off the floor, and the Warnocks rubbed his nose into it until he had a bloody nose. Just a little side note about Rusty. Rusty was paralyzed and disabled. He was known as the poster child for Easter seals when he was 5 years old. There is a picture. I'm going to pop it up here. That's of him and Betty Warnock, and I believe Dana. So then Frank also testified he was punched on multiple occasions in the stomach by George Warnock because George said Frank didn't do his chores correctly. Frank also testified he saw them put one girl in a chair and handcuff her to it. He also testified another girl he saw getting a whipping in front of other kids. When this girl said sorry, Betty pulled her pants down and whipped her again. Okay, so DJ Friedland, it's on the, yeah. He was 5 years old. He testified he was put in a box for punishment. He also testified his sister, Dana, not the Warnock's Dana, a different Dana, 4 years old, was put in a box too. DJ testified he saw them handcuffed a 17-year-old girl to a bed because she was stealing candy out of the kitchen. So that leads us to Debbie Rooney, the 17-year-old. She was a foster child of the Warnocks. She was mentally disabled. Debbie did testify that the Warnocks would handcuff her to chairs and her bed. She said she hated the handcuffs because they hurt her. When asked by the attorney, was there anything else she wanted to say, Debbie got quiet and put her head down. The attorney reassured her it was safe and she could tell the court what happened. Now, keep in mind, this was in the 80s, so they didn't separate these kids. The Warnocks were there. They were looking right at them. Very scared, Debbie testified that George had played with her private parts. George also had handcuffed her to a chair naked for all the kids to see. It was also brought as evidence that Debbie, when she first entered the Warnock's home as a foster child. She was a size 16 when this all took place. And I don't know when she entered the home, but she was down to a size 5. Debbie was removed from their care immediately and was thriving in her new foster home. I don't know if she got adopted or anything like that. Okay, so Peggy Roth, a parent, testified she saw the boxes, but Betty told her they would put the smaller kids in there for a nap. It was a safety issue, so that they didn't get out of the cribs and hurt themselves. Huh? Peggy said she didn't think nothing about it. Peggy testified she had walked in and saw a teenage girl naked on the floor playing with her son in a toy truck. The teenager was rolling the truck between her legs for her son to get. After this incident, they never took their son back. So they're talking actually about Debbie here. She didn't actually know what she was doing. So James Roth is married to Peggy. He said he was naive to the Warnocks. After a while, his wife had seen what she did with Debbie and their son, and they agreed not to take their son back. So now we have another parent, Debbie Anderson. I know, a lot of same names here. Testified her son Terrence, 6 years old, told her he was spanked. She said he had come home with bruises all over his body. Terrence Parker, 6 years old, Debbie Anderson's son, testified he was locked in the boxes, and when he went to sit up, he'd always hit his head on the box. Meredith Thompson, 9 years old, testified the Warnocks had taken care of her since she was 3. When she first started there, they would nap on the beds, but then the boxes were there. Now, remember from part 1, Meredith was one of them that helped Mrs. Anderson find her son, BJ. Katie Hammond, 7 years old, testified she went with Miss Anderson and Meredith to find BJ. She testified that 2 days later, the boxes were gone from the room. Katie testified she didn't want to tell her mom because I wanted to keep the secret, and she didn't think her mom would like that. It's horrible. Joey Cordora, 4 years old, testified he was in the boxes all day long. Joseph Cordora, Joey's parent, testified they stopped taking their kids there because they would get them ready to go and the kids would freak out and start throwing tantrums. After they stopped taking them there, they stopped the tantrums. So Mary Grice, parent, testified her 2-year-old son said he had slept in the boxes. Pat Hutchinson, another parent, testified her 2 sons went to the Warnocks. Her son Jeffrey had bruises all over his body. She called George and he told her that he spanked him with a paddle after Jeffrey threw a tantrum about taking a nap. Pat testified she filed a child abuse case with Social Services, aka DHS, and nothing was ever done. So, just a little side note, the parents of Jeffrey actually sued the Warnocks in a civil case and won that, and Jeffrey was actually awarded $1 million. Probably never saw it, but they won. Ann Burns, a parent, testified her 3 kids went to Warnocks between January and August of 1980. Nathan, her 10-year-old and the oldest, told her that him and the older children were told to hide in the camper when the state inspector came, and they hid the little kids in the boxes. Suspicious. Evidence submitted, an unnamed social worker saw the boxes some time ago, and Betty told this person that she put the kids in there to calm down. The social worker said she could not do that and made her promise that she wouldn't do it anymore. In 1978, there was an investigation about George using a paddle on the kids. He was told to throw it away and not to do that anymore. Case was closed. So there was one person that came out in the media in favor of the Warnocks. I don't think he ever testified that I know of. So his name was Pastor Browning. He told media that the Warnocks were innocent of the abuse accusations. He had known them for a while, and Betty was saved in 1976. However, some of the church goers didn't agree. Florence Powell was a very boisterous person and told the media that she was tired of the Warnocks hiding behind the church. It wasn't no place for that. Nope. So the Warnocks were actually convicted in November of 1982 of 12 counts of neglect and abandonment. The maximum sentence of this was 60 years in jail. However, both of them had to serve 30 days in jail apart. So Betty went in first, and then George went in second. And then 5 years probation. And they also had to pay $1,000 each in fines. So in May of 1983, the IRS actually seized the home for back taxes and sold it at auction for $53,279. There was a police report that before the Warnocks moved out, that the house was being ripped apart. I don't know what the truth is behind that. Now keep in mind, this house was huge. It had 6 bedrooms, an indoor swimming pool, a toy room, a recreational room, and had land to it. So for $53,279, someone got a good deal. However, like I said earlier, it did burn down. So, you ever wonder what happened to those 4 boxes that were in the court and submitted as evidence? Well, in August of 1987, the courthouse was going to destroy them because they needed room. But the historical building of Des Moines has taken the ownership and put them on display as part of the history. I don't know how I feel about that. And I don't know if historical building still has them. They might have taken them down. I don't know if they still have them or ownership of them, or if they destroyed them. So, and you would think the story was over, but it's not even close. Yeah, some more sad things coming up soon. I want to thank you for listening for part 2, and be good, and we'll see you next time.